1974, at the Paris Auto Salon, Porsche unveiled a new state-of-the-art production car. The car gleaned design and power ideas from Porsche's successful racing steeds of the 70s, the 917, the RSR, the Carrera RS. A bit fearful that this turbocharged machine would not be accepted by Porsche's #1 market, the United States, because of its relatively high price tag, they were a bit conservative as to the potential sales numbers. But when the 930 Turbo was introduced to America in 1976, sales galloped away, and the factory could not keep pace with orders. Waiting lists at dealers for as long as 1 year were not uncommon. The 930 Turbo differs from its 911 parentage in many ways. The front spoiler, designed to help the front end stick in cornering. Wider footprint tires to provide road holding, mounted on 7x15 front wheels and 8x15 rears. Exaggerated fender flares to accommodate those tires. The trademark whale tail. The 930 boasts lots of power and has for years been the favorite street rod of those fortunate enough to own one. The 1976 930 motor is the 911-based six-cylinder, enlarged to 3 liters, 6.5 to 1 compression ratio, 152 miles per hour top speed, 0 to 100 in 13 seconds. It utilizes a turbocharging system which forces air into the motor more forcefully, thereby creating a much richer mixture of fuel and air. This combination produces a much hotter explosion in the combustion chambers, producing about 234 horsepower in the U.S. version of the motor. The turbocharger itself is actually located on the underside of the car, cradled amongst the exhaust system. The rear deck lid houses the rear window wiper assembly and the air intake system for the motor. A portion of this air is routed through an air conditioning condenser, thereby keeping both engine and driver cool. To conform with the U.S. safety regulations of the day, the bumpers are mounted on shock-absorbing struts, which protect against the mandated 5-mile-per-hour impact minimums for 1976. This example sports European headlights and a high-pressure headlight washing system mounted on the front bumper. This interior boasts the optional sports seats, which give much greater lateral support during high-speed cornering, but make ingress and egress a bit more difficult than Porsche's standard seating fare. The 1976 Turbo's dash configuration is basically that of the standard 911, and the 930 utilizes a bare air conditioning system installed under the dash. The Turbo also offered a Blaupunkt Bamberg electronic radio, a very advanced piece of equipment in its day, offering even a recording feature. An automatic temperature control for the heater. Passengers relegated to the rear seats suffered from very little leg room. The front storage compartment was basically as in a 911 as well. The collapsible spare tire with its attendant inflation pump. Surrounding the spare was a 21-gallon fuel tank. The air conditioning evaporator and blower assembly were also stowed there, as was the usual assortment of heating and defroster ducts. The exaggerated flare design for the 930 was taken from earlier Porsche racing cars. Cars such as the 1974 3-liter RSR. This successful racer carried 10.5-inch front wheels and 14-inch rears. The early 70s saw great strides in tire design with the advent of the racing slick. Because of the extreme width of these tires, wider wheels and add-on flares were soon the racing recipe for the day. Additional 930 design ideas were gleaned from the street version of the 1974 Carrera, which sported wider fender flares than its sister 911 of that year, utilizing 6-inch front and 7-inch rear wheels. 1974, by the way, saw the introduction of a tail, designed to reduce rear-end lift. The 1977 Turbo saw some design changes from the car of the previous year. The most obvious was the switch to 16-inch wheels to accommodate the new Pirelli P7 low-profile road tire. The new tire design offered more footprint area and better road-holding characteristics than the previous CN36 versions used on the Turbo, but sacrificed nothing in riding comfort. (1977) also included some very subtle refinements. This example sports European-style headlights with rims painted to match the color of the body. A center console was added with the air conditioning controls, radio record microphone receptacle, and cassette storage shells integrated into a single unit. A center dash vent for the air conditioning system was added for additional driver comfort, and the air conditioning system was integrated into the dash. Here are the standard 930 seats usually offered in leather. A small turbo boost gauge was incorporated into the face of the tachometer. An identification plate in the driver's door jamb indicated the car's serial number and date of manufacture. In the trunk compartment, the 1977 Turbo saw the introduction of a vacuum-assisted brake booster, which helped reduce pedal pressure needed for bringing the speeding turbo to a halt. The only change in the motor for 1977 was the relocation of the turbo wastegate, which had a tendency to stick in the 1976 versions. Because of the high-performance capabilities of the intricate turbo engine, it required fuel with a minimum octane rating of 96. Even with all the horsepower of the turbo, some enthusiasts wanted to increase its performance and speed. Let's listen to Dieter Inzenhofer, noted Southern California turbo tuning expert, who will also offer some tips on buying a used turbo.
Well, in my opinion, an easy and inexpensive way to increase the horsepower on the 930 is by simply up the boost pressure. Bring the boost pressure up to a certain amount, and this, of course, will increase your horsepower. With today's gas, which the maximum we can get at this point is 92 octane, I wouldn't recommend to go much higher than 1 bar. Otherwise, you have a tremendous pinging problem. Mm-hmm. Of course, there's different ways of increasing your performance, not necessarily by horsepower, but simply by either a close ratio gearbox, changing your gears in your present transmission, or simply going to a 5-speed, which is available now. A company in Europe is building a 5-speed with mainly Porsche components. Mm-hmm. And it's quite expensive, but this does not affect your EPA standards in any way, naturally, but it does increase your performance of the car.
And would that be mainly on the low end of the performance scale?
No, this would be throughout the range.
Throughout the range?
Throughout the range, because on the 5-speed, for instance, the top speed remains the same, but yet you have one more gear in between, which of course brings the motor is always in a more suitable torque range.
What are some of the things that a buyer, a prospective buyer, should look for when looking for a used 930?
Mainly, what I personally would look for is that the car was not involved in a major accident. Because I'm a sort of a car buff myself, This is what I mainly would look for. Anything mechanical can be repaired or replaced, but once the actual monocoque was punched, I think it's really hard to bring it back to its original shape or configuration or smoothness of the body and so on. Secondary, I would look for mechanical shape. Simply, if the engine was tampered with as far as original equipment, if somebody was putting, for instance, different type of turbocharger, changing the exhaust, stuff like this, I personally would look for originality. And then, of course, get a mechanical expert involved in it to have him listen to the motor physically. If for worn-out parts, for instance, valve guides, which do wear out on turbos because of the tremendous temperatures we're running in these engines. But there again, these are things that could be repaired.
Since the 1979, the U.S. spec car hasn't been available, and European cars are coming into the country. What's required to change those cars to make them U.S. legal?
There's two ways the cars have to be federalized. One is a DOT, which is all safety-related equipment, and secondly is EPA, which is smog equipment. The car has to meet certain smog laws, and of course certain changes would have to be made to the car because European cars do not comply to our standards here. What I just want to say real brief, a few things that would have to be changed. For instance, the muffler. What they do here in this country, when they bring in a European car, they change the regular muffler to a catalytic type muffler, which is basically all self-made. It's not a factory type muffler of any sort. This could be replaced, and to make it legal, various other things, minor things would have to be changed too. But this, I myself have never done it, but there is places here in Southern California, they do convert cars. And this is basically what they have to do. As far as the DOT, the safety standards are concerned, which would include installing protective sidebars in your driver and passenger door. For instance, if it doesn't have the proper laminated glass windshield installed, this would have to be changed. Master cylinder control lights, and so on and so forth.
What kind of costs are we talking about to do something like that?
There's different prices, but I would say anywhere between $4,000 to $6,000. This is what I've heard so far.